Tonight, the truth will be revealed with the weight of that moment when everything becomes clear. This is one of those readings you can't look away from because it reflects the reality of the situation. The person you're thinking of has created distance between you and themselves. Not because of anything you did wrong, but because they have, consciously or unconsciously, decided to pull back and reassess. The Page of Wands reversed indicates someone who is hesitant, uncertain, and feeling a little lost. Typically, the Page of Wands represents curiosity, enthusiasm, and the spark to begin something. But in its reversed position, it shows someone who has stalled, retreated, or is unsure how to move forward. It tells us they aren't ready to take big steps in a relationship with you right now. Their energy is scattered, they are searching, questioning, and perhaps even doubting their own abilities to truly provide what's needed. This doesn't reflect on your worth. It's a mirror of their own internal struggles and confusion. Then comes the Two of Wands, a card about choices, directions, and new possibilities. It's a sign that this person is at a crossroads. They are contemplating which path to take, who to keep in their life, and who to let go of. Sometimes the Two of Wands indicates that someone is reaching out to new opportunities or new people before fully resolving their feelings about what they already have. This doesn't mean you're out of their mind. You're still there, just in the background. You're like a quiet, persistent melody that remains even as they explore other avenues. These two cards suggest that they may have distanced themselves because they felt they couldn't give you what you need at this time. They may have moved on with someone else or pursued another possibility too quickly, but that doesn't diminish your importance in their life. You are still a presence, a memory, and a potential future in their world. This is also a moment for reflection for you. The Page of Wands reversed encourages you to understand that their hesitation is about them, not about you. The Two of Wands reminds you that people will explore, make choices, and sometimes make mistakes. But your energy, your worth, and your light will always remain. You are captivating, strong, and that is what truly matters. The universe often uses pauses, distance, and reflection to bring hearts together at the right time. You're currently in a waiting and watching phase, but you're also moving forward. Your value is not diminished by someone else's decisions. In fact, your strength, patience, and understanding shine even brighter against the backdrop of their uncertainty. Now, I'd like to ask you if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, so we can easily connect with you, your energy, and learn more about you. So, let's get back to the video. There's an underlying sense here that this person didn't move forward so much as they drifted backward, back into emotional territory that feels familiar, predictable, and safe. The energy around them suggests they've reconnected with something from their past, or at the very least, with someone who carries the same emotional imprint. Even if this isn't literally an ex, it's a pattern they already know how to navigate. Familiarity feels easier to them than growth. What makes this dynamic complicated is that they never truly released you. Instead, they've kept you in their emotional atmosphere, close enough to feel, but far enough to avoid responsibility. It's as if you've been placed on a mental shelf, not discarded, just paused. There's a quiet belief on their end that if things don't work out elsewhere, you're still there. That's not love, it's emotional insurance. And while it may not come from malice, It is deeply unfair. This is not an easy truth, because there are moments when they miss you intensely. There are flashes where they imagine reconciling, fixing what broke, or stepping back into the connection. But instead of leaning into that discomfort, they choose distraction. And that distraction doesn't have to be romantic. It can look like surrounding themselves with friends, staying constantly busy, picking up new interests, spending more money than usual, or throwing themselves into work. Anything that keeps their mind occupied enough to avoid emotional reflection. From their perspective, the connection with you feels like something that already ran its course. Not because it lacked depth, but because it required evolution. And rather than rise to meet that, they decided to move laterally, forming new bonds, new routines, new social ties that don't challenge them in the same way. It's easier to start fresh than to repair something that asks for accountability. At the heart of all of this is a sense of inadequacy. Being close to you forced them to see parts of themselves they weren't ready to confront. You highlighted gaps between who they were and who they wanted to be. That discomfort made them defensive. Instead of owning their shortcomings or being honest about their limitations, they slowly retreated. The future they once painted for you wasn't entirely false, but it also wasn't fully achievable for them at the time. When you first entered their life, they were in a low place emotionally. They were struggling, uncertain, and searching for stability. Your energy met them exactly where they were. It felt aligned, grounding, and almost destined. But as time went on, you continued to grow, and they didn't. And rather than rise alongside you, they chose to step away quietly, carrying unresolved feelings with them. When your paths first crossed, it wasn't by accident. The energy surrounding that moment was heavy, intense, and charged with emotional endings. This was not a light-hearted beginning. It was the kind of meeting that happens when one chapter is collapsing and another is quietly opening. From the start, there was an undeniable pull between you. The connection didn't need time to warm up. It was immediate, instinctive, and impossible to ignore. For some of you, it began as a close bond that felt safe and familiar, like you had known each other before. For others, it moved straight into romance, fueled by chemistry that felt almost electric. Either way, the closeness formed quickly, and it felt real, deep, meaningful. What was hidden beneath the surface, though, was the emotional state they were in when they met you. They were still walking away from a painful past, carrying wounds that hadn't healed yet. There was betrayal, loss, or emotional exhaustion lingering in them. They hadn't processed it fully, but they were desperate to feel okay again. And then there was you. Your energy felt like relief, like shelter, like warmth after a long emotional winter. You didn't pressure them. You didn't demand answers. You showed up with patience, understanding, and emotional depth. In your presence, they could let their guard down. They felt seen without being judged, comforted without being questioned. Without fully realizing it, they leaned on you. You became a place where their pain could rest. That's why the bond felt so intense so fast, because it wasn't just attraction, it was emotional safety. You represented peace at a time when they were breaking apart inside. But here's the truth that makes this connection so complex. When a bond forms during a period of emotional collapse, it carries imbalance. You were steady. They were healing. You were offering from a place of wholeness, while they were still gathering pieces of themselves. That doesn't make the connection false. It makes it fragile. They didn't choose you casually. They chose you because you felt like home. But feeling at home isn't the same as being ready to build a life together. And when someone hasn't finished grieving their past, they can mistake comfort for love and safety for forever. So if you ever felt like you gave more, held more space, or carried more emotional weight, it's because you did. You were strong when they were vulnerable. You were present when they were recovering. And that dynamic shaped everything that followed. You didn't imagine the depth. You didn't exaggerate the bond. It was real, but it was born at a moment when they weren't capable of matching you in the way you deserved. When this person came into your life, they were not just struggling, they were at the end of themselves. Emotionally, they were in a place of collapse, where old wounds, past losses, and broken promises had piled up all at once. They were trying to survive the aftermath of a painful chapter, and they didn't yet know how to rebuild on their own. That's when you appeared, not as a distraction, but as a stabilizing force in their life. Everything you offered them mattered. Your patience, emotional availability, and consistency became the foundation they stood on while they were putting themselves back together. You didn't just support them, you helped restore their sense of self. Slowly, piece by piece, they began to feel stronger, more confident, and more hopeful, largely because of what they received from you during that fragile time. As the connection deepened, the relationship naturally began to intensify. What started as comfort and safety evolved into emotional closeness, attachment, and expectation. With that shift came the moment where words and promises were no longer enough. The relationship began to ask for action, integrity, and accountability. And that is where the dynamic changed. When they were faced with the reality of following through on what they had promised, they became uncomfortable. Instead of rising to meet that responsibility, they pulled away emotionally. The respect that once felt steady started to erode, not because you demanded too much, but because accountability forced them to confront their own limitations. Rather than owning those limitations, they deflected them onto the relationship itself. This person is naturally intuitive. From the beginning, they were deeply attuned to your emotional world. They didn't analyze you in a calculated way. It came effortlessly to them. They understood what made you feel safe, valued, and connected. And because you were providing them with exactly what they needed at the time, they instinctively mirrored that energy back to you. It felt mutual, balanced, and genuine. However, mirroring emotional needs is not the same as having long-term intention. In the early stages, they may have truly believed the future they described. At that moment, it felt real to them too. But belief without emotional readiness can only go so far. Once the relationship moved from potential into reality, once you began asking for clarity, consistency, and follow-through, the story they were telling themselves could no longer hold. This wasn't about deception in a calculated sense. It was about someone wanting the feeling of connection without fully understanding the responsibility that comes with it. They wanted love to remain light, supportive, and comforting, but not demanding. And when the relationship required emotional maturity and honesty, the imbalance became impossible to ignore. The Six of Wands reversed is a card that speaks to hidden motives, misaligned intentions, and the shadow side of admiration. Upright, the Six of Wands celebrates victory, recognition, and shared achievement. But in reverse, it shows the cost of ego, insecurity, and self-interest creeping into relationships. In the story of your connection, this card exposes the truth that, while the bond may have felt genuine, the intentions behind it were complicated. When you first met this person, the chemistry was undeniable. There was laughter, effortless understanding, shared energy, and a natural connection that felt almost fated. Being around them was intoxicating. It felt like you were on the same wavelength, like the universe had aligned your paths. You matched each other in energy, humor, and desire. The connection itself was real. There's no denying that. But the energy behind it wasn't always aligned with honesty or long-term commitment. This person was carrying unresolved pain, wounds from the past they weren't ready to face. And in their vulnerability, you became their safe harbor. Your presence, your attention, your care, they made them feel seen, valued, and alive again. The Six of Wands reversed shows exactly how easy it is for someone to mistake the relief of emotional comfort for genuine relational growth. They mirrored your energy, reflecting back joy and connection. But their ego was running the show, not a fully grounded commitment. Over time, as the relationship deepened, the cracks began to show. When things moved from effortless chemistry to actual responsibility, the weight of your expectations, clarity, and follow-through became challenging for them. Disappearances, withdrawal, or conflicts over seemingly minor issues weren't about you. They were about their inability to carry the emotional depth that the connection required. The reversed Six of Wands highlights this: admiration, affection, and attention without readiness for accountability. This is why the connection may have felt confusing or even painful. They genuinely enjoyed being with you. They genuinely valued your presence, but their joy often came from the reflection of their ego rather than from a shared vision of the relationship. They felt important, validated, and energized, but they were not emotionally prepared to take the steps necessary to build a stable, long-term connection with you. What the Six of Wands reversed ultimately teaches is that someone can love, enjoy, and even deeply value you, but still fail to meet the level of commitment, maturity, or consistency that your energy deserves. You weren't too much. You weren't wrong. You were simply offering your light to someone whose timing, readiness, and emotional alignment weren't ready to match it. And here's the empowering truth: your energy is transformative. You elevate those around you. You give deeply, authentically, and fearlessly. Even if this person couldn't fully meet you, you reminded them of their own worth, and that is a rare gift. The Six of Wands reversed shows where they fell short, but it also illuminates your strength, your value, and the clarity you now carry. The Knight of Cups reversed is a card of emotional imbalance, shifting motives, and charm that can feel real but often lacks follow-through. Upright, this knight is the romantic dreamer, the one who inspires hearts and carries love on a silver platter. But reversed, it exposes the shadow of that energy: inconsistency, self-interest, and the tendency to drift wherever feelings serve the ego most. In the story of your connection, this is exactly what we're seeing. When you first met this person, everything felt magnetic. There was chemistry, laughter, shared energy, and an effortless bond that made you feel seen and alive. You gave your heart freely, and they mirrored that back in ways that made it feel authentic, magical even. But the reversed Knight of Cups signals that this reflection was conditional. Their affection and attention were strong only when it boosted their ego, filled a void, or made them feel admired. The deeper your attachment grew, the more their attention waned, not because you did anything wrong, but because they weren't equipped to handle your depth. As time went on, this person's motives shifted. The Knight of Cups reversed shows exactly how charming energy can be misused. They began to take your devotion for granted. They had your heart in their hands, but when others came into their orbit, people who flattered them, admired them, or gave them easy validation without asking for accountability, they naturally leaned toward that energy instead. You became secondary, not because your love wasn't real, but because their emotional focus was guided by self-interest rather than by commitment or integrity. This card also reveals a painful truth. You were used, but not in a shallow way. They didn't necessarily plan to hurt you. They were simply following a path that kept them emotionally comfortable. You offered consistency, care, and devotion, and in return, they took the best of you, your attention, your trust, your love. But the deeper, sustaining part of the connection, the part that requires accountability, honesty, and emotional courage, was never something they were ready to meet. And yet, the reversed Knight of Cups teaches a lesson beyond heartbreak. It shows the contrast between your emotional depth and their inconsistency. You gave fully, authentically, and fearlessly. You illuminated their life with your heart, but they could not match your energy with the same level of responsibility. This isn't a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of timing, readiness, and alignment. The Knight of Cups reversed doesn't diminish the magic you shared. It simply exposes the gap between potential and reality. The empowerment in this reading lies in seeing clearly. You are someone who offers real love, unwavering support, and radiant energy. And you deserve someone who not only sees that, but meets it with equal intention. The Knight of Cups reversed warns of charm without substance, attention without accountability, and love without alignment. Recognizing this allows you to reclaim your energy, your heart, and your self-respect. Ultimately, this card invites you to honor your depth and your capacity to love without compromise. You were never too much or not enough. You simply encountered someone whose emotional maturity couldn't meet the brilliance you brought. This is not the end of your story. It's a lesson in clarity, self-respect, and the power of choosing connections that are fully reciprocal, fully aligned, and fully worthy of the heart you carry.